$17 billion. As of the summer of 2025, that's how much Social Security had paid out in back pay, fixing two rules that, for 40 years, cut or erased benefits for millions of public workers. So now your feed is full of clips screaming the same thing. You're owed $22,000. Claim it now. Here's what nobody's telling you. For most people watching this, that's a lie. This law owes you nothing. But a few of you are owed real money, thousands of dollars, and have no idea. And the people owed the most will get nothing unless they do one specific thing in time. By the end of this, you'll know exactly which of those you are. Let me show you 4 people. Meet Carol, retired school teacher. For years, a rule quietly shrank her own Social Security check. Carol's owed money, and the good news is, she doesn't have to lift a finger. The fix is coming to her automatically. Now meet Margaret. She's a widow. Her husband paid into Social Security for 40 years, but a different rule wiped out her survivor benefit completely. So years ago, when she asked, she was told, "Don't even bother applying. You'll get nothing." And she didn't. Margaret may be owed the most of anyone in this video. And here's the cruel twist. The same system that's quietly fixing Carol cannot fix Margaret, because there's nothing on file to fix. If Margaret does nothing, she loses money every single month. And the maddening part? Her whole fix comes down to a single phone call she doesn't know she's supposed to make. I'll give you the number and the exact words to say before we're done. Hold on to Margaret. Now meet a third person, Walter. Walter is a retired federal worker. He spent his career at a federal agency and was hired back in 1979. That date matters more than you'd think, and I'll show you exactly why in a minute. Walter has a solid federal pension, but for years, his Social Security check, the one he earned from summer jobs and a stretch in the private sector before he went federal, came out smaller than the numbers seem to say it should. He's a lot like Carol, just in a federal uniform instead of a classroom, and he's owed a correction too. Hold Walter for the moment when the year 1979 becomes the whole point. And fourth, meet Dave. Dave worked ordinary jobs his whole life and always paid into Social Security. Dave is owed exactly zero, and the internet has been lying to him about it. 4 people, 4 completely different answers. So, which one are you? To find out, you have to understand the 2 rules at the center of all of this. Carol's rule was the Windfall Elimination Provision, WEP. It hit people who earned a pension from a job that did not take Social Security tax out of their paycheck. A lot of public sector jobs work that way, and who also worked other jobs that did pay in. WEP used a special formula to shrink their own Social Security check. Notice the word, shrink, not erase. And here's the part everyone gets backwards. The cut was bigger the fewer years you'd paid into Social Security. 30 or more years of covered work, and WEP didn't touch you at all. 20 or fewer, you took the full hit. In between, it was graduated. There was also a cap. It could never take more than half your non-covered pension. Put a real number on Carol. Say her own Social Security benefit, earned at all those covered jobs, should have been $800 a month. WEP could knock that down to something like $500, $300, gone, every single month, on a benefit she genuinely earned. Stretch that across a decade of retirement, and she was quietly shorted tens of thousands of dollars. And here's the part that gets me. A lot of Carols never even realized WEP was why their check looked small. They just assumed that low number was theirs. It wasn't. That was Carol. Her own earned check, quietly shaved for years. Margaret's rule was harsher. The Government Pension Offset, or GPO. It went after spouses, widows, and widowers who get a government pension from non-covered work. GPO subtracted 2/3 of that pension from any spousal or survivor benefit. Picture Margaret's numbers. A government pension of, say, $3,000 a month. 2/3 of that, $2,000, gets subtracted from her survivor benefit. If that survivor benefit was $1,800, the $2,000 swallows it whole. She got nothing from her husband's 40 years of work. That's why she never applied. Both rules, gone now. But knowing they're gone is only step 1. Now, before I tell you how to get your money, I want to do something the viral clips never do. I want to be fair to the other side for 60 seconds. Because if all you ever hear is, "These were evil rules that robbed you," you're going to be an easy mark for the next person who wants to sell you outrage. So here's the honest why. Social Security's benefit formula is built to be progressive. That's a fancy word for it deliberately tilts in favor of people who earned very little over their lifetime. The math replaces a much bigger slice of a low earner's wages than a high earner's. That's on purpose. It's a feature, not a bug. Now here's the snag the formula couldn't see. To Social Security, somebody who spent 30 years in a job that didn't pay in, a teacher, a firefighter, a federal worker like Walter, looks, on paper, like a person who barely worked, because those non-covered years show up as zeros. The formula doesn't know they were earning a full salary the whole time and building a separate pension. So, without any adjustment, that worker would get the big, generous low earner boost on top of a healthy government pension when they weren't actually a low earner at all. In Congress's words back in 1983, the goal was to stop people from getting higher Social Security benefits as if they were long-time low-wage earners. That's literally the reasoning, and that rule became WEP. The government pension offset came even earlier, in 1977, and the logic there was about treating spouses the same way. Under a rule called dual entitlement, if you worked your own covered job and your own Social Security benefit was bigger than the spousal benefit you'd get off your husband or wife, you don't get to stack both. Your own check offsets the spousal one. GPO was meant to apply that same offset to people whose own work produced a government pension instead of a Social Security check. The intent: treat everyone's spousal benefit roughly the same, whether their own career was covered or not. So, were these rules villains? Honestly, they started as an attempt at fairness. The fight, for 40 years, was over whether they massively overcorrected, whether the formula chopped far more than the so-called windfall was ever worth, especially for modest pensions. Congress eventually decided yes, it went too far, and repealed them. You can think they were wrong from day one, or think they had a point that got overdone. Both are defensible. What matters for your wallet is they're gone now. I just don't ever want you taking your understanding of your own money from somebody whose whole business model is keeping you angry. On January 5, 2025, the Social Security Fairness Act was signed into law, and it did what Congress had ducked for 40 years. It repealed both rules. Not reduced, not phased out. Gone. And it was made retroactive to January of 2024, so Social Security owes affected people the gap between what they were paid and what they should have been paid since that date. That's the back pay you keep hearing about, a one-time lump sum, and then a permanently higher monthly check from there. Two pieces, the catch-up and the raise. Now the honest figures, straight from the Congressional Budget Office and Social Security, not the clickbait. In its 2025 estimate, the Congressional Budget Office found the WEP repeal, Carol's fix, raised checks by about $360 a month on average for roughly 2.1 million people. That's the figure as of the Budget Office's 2025 estimate. The GPO repeal, Margaret's, runs larger, about $700 a month for spouses and around $1,190 for widows and widowers. The whole thing costs an estimated $198 billion over 10 years. The lump sums started going out the week of February 24, 2025, and as of July 7 that year, Social Security reported more than 3.1 million payments, totaling about $17 billion. And I'll be careful, that's a snapshot frozen on that date, not a promise about today. So where did $22,000 come from? Somebody took the biggest possible back pay case, slapped it on every retiree, and made a thumbnail. These are averages. Some people get over $1,000 a month, and a whole lot of people get nothing because the law never applied to them. Which brings us to the question that actually matters for you. 4 groups this law was written for. 1. Public school teachers in states where teaching didn't pay into Social Security: California, Texas, Ohio, Illinois, Massachusetts, Colorado, Connecticut, Georgia, Louisiana, and about a dozen more, who also paid into Social Security through other work. That's Carol. 2. Firefighters, police, and other state or local government workers in those same non-covered systems who also paid in elsewhere. The same trap as the teachers, just a different uniform. Think of the firefighter who drew a city pension but also ran a side business for 20 years that paid into Social Security. WEP shrank that earned benefit too. 3. Federal employees under the old civil service retirement system. And this one is Walter, so let me finally pay off that 1979 date. There are 2 big federal retirement systems, and the dividing line is basically whether you were hired before or after the start of 1984. The older one is CSRS, Civil Service Retirement System. People hired under CSRS, generally before January 1, 1984, did not have Social Security tax taken out of their federal paychecks. Their federal pension is a non-covered pension, exactly the kind WEP and GPO went after. Walter was hired in '79, so he's CSRS, so he got hit, just like Carol the teacher. The newer system is FERS, the Federal Employees Retirement System, and here's the clarification that saves 1,000 arguments at the dinner table. If you came in under FERS, you did pay into Social Security the whole time, so none of this touched you. Same federal building, same flag on the wall, completely different answer, decided almost entirely by your hire date. So if there's a retired federal worker in your life, the question isn't, were you a Fed? It's CSRS or FERS. That one word tells you whether they're a Walter who's owed a correction or a Dave who isn't. And honestly, the CSRS crowd gets overlooked the most because there are fewer of them every year, which is exactly why their case slips through the cracks. And 4. Spouses, widows, and widowers whose benefit was reduced or zeroed by GPO because they draw a government pension. That's Margaret. And notice this group is different from the other 3. The first 3 are about your own earned check. This one is about a benefit on someone else's record, your husband's, your wife's. And that distinction is going to matter enormously in a few minutes, because it's the reason Margaret's fix doesn't happen on its own. If you heard yourself in any of those 4, keep listening, because what you do next depends entirely on which one you are. Now, the honest flip side, the part the viral clips skip. If you spent your career in ordinary jobs that did take Social Security out of your paycheck, and that's the large majority of retirees, then WEP and GPO never touched you, and a rule that never cut your check has nothing to give back. That's Dave. If you never had a pension from non-covered government work, this law changes nothing for you, no matter what the thumbnails promise. There's no shame in that. It just means your benefit was already counted fairly. Knowing you're Dave saves you a phone call, a worry, and a letdown. But if you're Carol or Margaret, here's where it gets real. This is the part the clones get wrong, so listen closely, because Carol and Margaret do opposite things. If you're Carol, already getting a check that WEP or GPO had reduced, you do almost nothing. Social Security is adjusting it automatically. You don't file a form, you don't pay anyone to recover it for you, and please don't. Those recovery fee pitches are circling this like sharks. The only thing the autofix needs is to know where to send the money, so log into your My Social Security account at ssa.gov and make sure your mailing address and direct deposit are current. That's the whole to-do list, and there is no deadline. That claim before August or lose it clock in the thumbnails was invented to make you click. Before I get to Margaret, one thing about GPO that trips people up, because GPO actually hit 2 different kinds of benefit, and they're not the same. The first is a spousal benefit. Money you can draw off your husband or wife's record while they are still alive. The second is a survivor benefit, money you draw off their record after they have passed away, and it's usually the larger of the 2. GPO could shrink or wipe out either one. So one woman might have a living husband and find her spousal benefit zeroed today. Another, like Margaret, is a widow whose survivor benefit was zeroed years ago. Same rule, 2 very different life situations, and that difference is exactly why what happens next splits in 2. But Margaret is the hard case, and this is the moment I told you to hold on to her. Think about Margaret's story for a second, because it's thousands of real people. Decades ago, when her husband died, she went to claim a survivor benefit, and she was told, correctly at the time, that GPO would reduce it to 0. So why would she keep an open claim for nothing? She walked away. She grieved, she got on with her life, and she assumed that door was permanently closed. Now the law that closed it is gone. But here's the cruelty of it. Because Margaret never applied, there is nothing on file for the computer to correct. The autofix can't touch a benefit that doesn't exist in the system. So Margaret has to act, contact Social Security and file an application, so there's finally a claim for them to pay. The number is 1-800-772-1213. And the exact question is, do I need to file a new application under the Social Security Fairness Act? And here is the one real reason not to wait. There's no hard cliff, but when you finally file, back pay generally only reaches back about 6 months before your application. So every month a never applied person waits is back pay quietly gone for good. Not act now or lose everything. Just file sooner, because waiting leaks money. Margaret is owed the most and is the most likely to get nothing. Don't let someone you love be Margaret. Let me tell you what to actually expect, because back pay is vague and scammers love vague. It comes in 2 pieces. First, a one-time lump sum that covers the gap. Everything you were underpaid going back to January 2024. For most people that landed earlier in 2025, Social Security moved faster on this than almost anyone expected. Second, your monthly check goes up and stays up from there. That's the part that matters for the rest of your life. So here's how to check it's real for you, step by step, and it's free. Go to ssa.gov and open your My Social Security account. If you've never made one, you can set it up right there. It's the same secure, identity-verified login the government uses, and you'll need to confirm who you are with a few personal questions. Once you're in, do 3 things. 1. check your mailing address and your direct deposit bank information and fix them if they're stale. Remember, for a Carol, that is the only thing standing between you and money that's already coming. If your address is from 2 moves ago, a paper check could be headed to a house you don't live in. 2. Open your payment history and look for the one-time lump sum, the catch-up payment. 3. Look at your current monthly benefit amount and see whether it's stepped up from what you were getting before. If you were a Carol and you see both the lump sum and a higher monthly check, you're done. The system did its job. You don't need to call anyone. If you think your new amount still looks wrong or nothing changed and you genuinely believe it should have, that's your cue to call and ask them to check your specific record. Notice what I did not tell you to do: pay anybody, which is exactly where the vultures come in. Here's a detail that quietly tells you this is real and not vaporware: the speed. People assumed a 40-year fix would crawl through the government for years. It didn't. The retroactive lump sum started going out the week of February 24, 2025, just weeks after the law was signed. By early June, Social Security reported that about 91% of the affected cases had already been processed. And in the snapshot they published on July 7, 2025, the agency said it had sent more than 3.1 million payments, totaling roughly $17 billion. That's the $17 billion from the very start of this video, and now you know what's actually inside that number. 2 cautions, because I'm careful about this. First, that's a snapshot frozen on that date, not a live scoreboard. I'm not telling you what today's total is, because I don't have a verified figure for today, and neither do the clips throwing numbers around. Second, 91% processed does not mean everybody got the right amount. Complicated cases take longer, and the never applied folks like Margaret were never in that pipeline to begin with. But the headline is encouraging. This moved fast, the money is genuinely going out, and you do not need to panic buy anyone's help to be part of it. Quick, because you'll keep seeing it. Social Security is hiding this from you. No, they announced it publicly, posted the numbers, and are auto-paying people. Everyone over 60 is owed thousands. No, most retirees are Dave, owed 0. And then there's the one that actually costs people money: the recovery services. These are outfits that swoop in and offer to claim your back pay for you, for a fee or a cut of the check. Hear me on this. For Carol, the money is coming automatically and for free. For Margaret, the application is free to file herself with 1 phone call. There is nothing these services do that you can't do for free, and every dollar they take is a dollar out of money you were already owed. They thrive on exactly the fear those thumbnails create: make you panic, then sell you the cure. So here's the rule that protects you from all of it. Any real answer about your benefits comes from one place: Social Security itself, at ssa.gov or 1-800-772-1213. Not a YouTuber, not a text message, not a company that found you first. If a claim makes you feel panic or reach for your wallet, that's your signal it's bait. The real story here is calm, specific, and costs you nothing. Bring it home with our 4 people. If you're Carol, already getting a reduced check, the fix is automatic. Just keep your address and direct deposit current at ssa.gov and ignore the fee hunters. If you're Walter, a CSRS federal retiree hired before 1984, already collecting a reduced Social Security check, you're in Carol's boat. It's automatic. Same to-do list, just confirm the system has the right address and bank account. If you're Margaret, you never applied because the old rules would have zeroed you out. You're the one who has to act. You need to file, and you shouldn't wait, because back pay only reaches back about 6 months. And if you're Dave, an ordinary Social Security covered career, this law isn't about you, and that's perfectly okay. Knowing that just saved you a phone call and a letdown. To make it dead simple, I put together a free 1-page checklist. The 4 affected groups, the auto-fix versus file question, and the exact phone script. It's free. The link's in the description. And if you know a retired teacher, a firefighter, or a widow who might be a Margaret, send it to them. That is the one share off this video that could actually put money in someone's pocket. This is educational, not personal financial advice. Everyone's situation is different, so confirm your own at ssa.gov or with the Social Security Administration. I'm Jeffrey Miller. Straight answers about your retirement money. No panic, no pitch. Next time, I'm walking through Medicare's enrollment windows and the penalties that can follow you for the rest of your life. So if that's on your horizon, subscribe and I'll see you in the next one.